The concept of planned obsolescence usually refers to a product that has mechanical components or some type of features inside that degrade over time on purpose of the company and ultimately break a lot sooner than the individual customer who purchased it really thought. They thought that little toaster was going to last 30, 40 years. They thought they could be buried with their toaster, but they find out it only lasts for 3 years. And I think that this concept of planned obsolescence really can be used in the trading card game space. And I think that there are a lot of trading card games out there that have planned obsolescence in them. The companies initiating them from the start know that it's just a toy, and they think, well, I'm going to make the toy for like 2 to 3 years and then poof, it's gone. They plan that from the beginning, and I kind of have proof. Not too much proof. No proof, really. I have no proof. It's just a thought experiment that you can go on with me and just think it really through. But the main core concept is, right, is the customer has expectations, and the intent behind the manufacturer really it has it really like soothes their expectations, but nefariously in the background they build something into it where they make the product have a lot less useful life than it really should, and that the customer's expecting it to. And that's the main thing that I want to relay, is that the customer goes in with this expectation, but then they're disappointed when they realize that it wasn't what they thought of all along, and the product didn't last long enough. So here's the example of the little toaster when I'm talking about planned obsolescence, if you haven't heard of this term. So what a company will do is they have their toasters that they're making, but they don't want to make a toaster that lasts 500 years. You're going to go to business, my friend. You are not going to sell enough toasters out there, because when you sell it to everyone that you want to, you can't sell any more toasters until another 500 years. So what do? You're a smart individual. You realize that there's a heater component, and that if you cheap out on the materials and don't tell anyone, and then you test it a bunch and test like 50 toasters, and you have them, pressure test them, right? And you realize, oh, with that cheaper component, it's only going to last like 3 years or 2 years, right? Because it just wears down over the heating elements and the alloys and everything. They break apart, and they get into the bread and everything. They break down over time, and eventually your toaster is fried, and you need to buy a new one from the company that made the old one. And that's more money for the company, and the company likes more money. So you have this concept, and it is out there in the world. You can see it in a bunch of products and services out there, a lot of products. And I would honestly love to hear a lot of examples, if you have them, in the comment section down below, of what you have seen planned obsolescence in products out there. The biggest thing that I can tell you from my life story is I remember a time, I forgot who it was, but they had a couch. And these couches have a lever. And the lever is so you can put your feet up and the little thing flaps out, right? Well, when you pull that lever, it presses against the plate. And the plate in there was plastic. And plastic is bullshit, because it only will take so many lever pulls, maybe like 1,000 lever pulls, until that plastic just breaks and shatters through. Now they sell some other levers that are the same, pretty much same lever, but instead of a plastic plate, it's a metal plate. So that metal plate is never breaking, and that product is like $10, right, for the metal levers that never break versus the plastic cheap crap. And you might say, Bronson, well, they probably cheapen out on the plastic ones, but I believe that there's planned obsolescence. They know that it's going to break over time, and when it does, you as an individual who owns a couch, and you are not a seamstress or a couch maker, you're not going to know how to change a lever. I believe like 80% or 90% of the people will be like, well, my couch is broken. I need to go to Ashley Furniture, some bullshit place, and spend $5,000 on a new couch because I can't YouTube a video on how to fix my couch. That is what a lot of people do, and that is planned obsolescence. And then the couch makers make more money, make more money. Not only do they sell you a couch with inferior components and they profit there on the expense reduction, but then they get your business in the end in another 2 to 3 years when you need a new couch because you can't fix it yourself. Many companies are like this. They do this in their products, and they know from the get-go, and that's the key, they know from the get-go that it's going to break, and it only is going to last a certain amount of time, but the customer doesn't know it. Now, moving on to trading cards and trading card games. Now, you might say, Bronson, how do these cards not work anymore? They're cards. You can play with them. You can always play with them. They don't break down or anything. They are just the cards. It's not like your little toaster. It's not like your, little big couch. It's just trading cards. How do they just disappear? How do they break down? And that's the thing. I think that it's not more of the product, but it's more of the culture that's out there. And just came companies creating a toy, creating a product for 3 years, and then stopping manufacturing. And you might say, well, what's the big deal? If you are a consumer, right? So you buy a trading card game. You still have the cards, even if that game company shuts down. What's the big deal? You have fun. Don't you like fun? Isn't fun what everybody loves to have with trading cards? What's wrong with you, Bronson? You can still play with your cards. Well, that is true. You can still play with the cards. But you, as an individual and yuppie person, gets into a new trading card game and you're in the community, you're buying cards on platforms, you're going to the game store, and you see a bunch of events popping off, and you want to be included in the events with your little starter deck, don't you? You want to be in the events. You want to get those participation trophies. You even want to compete. You want to get the competitive cards. You want to interact with people who are playing the game, because a lot of people are playing at the game of my local game store, and the store is selling it and what have you, and content creators and everything else. Everybody's talking about the game. I want to be in this moment, in this community, in this environment. The environment, however, is not going to maintain its stability when the company stops making the game. So if you're in a game, let's call this game, I don't know, Star Wars Unlimited, and you're having fun, you got a starter deck, you're jamming out games at a local game store, and you decide to upgrade your deck. You buy a bunch of new cards, get a bunch of staples. You gotta have those staples. It's in the name, it says staple. You gotta have the staples. And you're doing good, you're playing, you're competing, and 3 months after you get into the game, oh my gosh. It looks like the IP renewal from Fantasy Flight Games, they didn't renew the IP. Disney didn't let them renew the IP. They can't make the game anymore. What is this? What's happening? They can't sell the game anymore, and the game stops being sold by Fantasy Flight, and they discontinue, and the game is dead. Well, you as a person who has purchased $1,000 to $2,000, $3,000 of cards because you wanted to make a bunch of decks, you wanted to get all your staples, you wanted to get all your cards. You got $3,000 worth of cards. Let's say, let's leave it at $3,000 because you're going into full force. You're really into the game. Well, what happens? Well, support and organized play from the company, those go away. No more events at the local game store, or if they are, they're not supported by any prize support. Well, that makes the competitive players who feed off that prize support go to other games, because they want to compete for prizes, and they want good prizes. They don't want small prizes. They want big prizes, so they go to the other games like Flesh and Blood. And then you have the stores. Well, if your competitive players aren't playing the game, why are you selling singles? If the players who compete aren't buying the cards and the card market is going, okay, I'm not going to sell any more cards. And then your marketplace, in the people who are buying and selling to stores, the stores aren't buying collections anymore. So the card prices just tank in value, and anybody who's in the marketplace, investors, collectors, those people dip and they get scared because the price goes down, they're out. The whole ecosystem gets fucked. That is what happens. And that is not theory or speculation or me just making things up. That happens with every trading card game that's ever existed. Now there are still niche communities and whatever have you and little lights and flickers of flame, but it's never a roaring fire again. You still have the devoted people who are going at it, but overall all the card prices just completely tank. The local game store environment of people going in cease to exist. The cards aren't sold, the booster boxes aren't sold at the game store. So when you go in, there's not many availability to play the game. You were under the assumption as an individual you spent $3,000. You want to do jam games, and there are so many games to be had. But now there's nothing because the game is dead, because the IP couldn't be renewed. Now, what if I told you that that was the plan all along? And Disney, or whoever executive in his high castle over there, signed a license agreement with FFG, knowing that it was only for a 3-year or 4 or 5-year term, and it had a renewal to that contract. And when they renewed, they knew that they were going to ask for some ridiculous increase, and FFG was like, well, we can't do that. And they knew that there's going to be disagreements and it would go poof. They knew that they would only make a card game for 2, 4, 5 years tops, right? They're going to make, and they're not making a card game. No. This isn't a card game. This is a fucking toy. This is a toy. We are making a children's toy. That's what those people in the high castles feel that they are producing, that they are doing here. This is a side hustle, my friends. And this is planned obsolescence. And I know that overall, this is just me making a bunch of assumptions, theories, and everything have you. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just a normal guy in a normal room. As you see, this is a normal man's structure here. Not too large, not too small. And then this is a normal room. Very, very normal environment here. Nothing special's going on. I'm no special individual. I'm just a viewer. And you might say, Bronson, I think you're full of shit. I say, okay, let time move on. Let time move on and let's see how it plays out. But all I'll say is Star Wars Destiny. Star Wars Destiny was the same exact thing. FFG made Star Wars Destiny for a while. They did really well. Things were popping off. And honestly, they were gaining a lot of momentum. They had the biggest the event that they had at the time. They were having big events and everything. They were doing great. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, the IP license wasn't renewed. Oh my gosh, who could have known? And they blame it on the dice were too big. They blame it on all this bullshit. No one knows. People know. I didn't do my research. But all I can say is that it was planned. There's a licensing agreement, and if you look at the bare bones of this, right? Let's take my theatrics out of whack. They have a license agreement in writing that has the specific terms that Disney is leasing or loaning or whatever L word you want to use to FFG for a certain period of time and manufacturing a game for a price. They're going to get some type of, I don't know, percentage of the revenue earned. They're going to get that and a flat $300,000 a year, whatever have you, right? They're going to get money in exchange for using their IP likeness for a given period of time. Now that given period of time will end. And when it ends, there's a very good chance it won't get renewed. And moving on to really the planned obsolescence portion. And if you think about the whole argument is, I know the biggest argument against it is, you're say, Bronson, look at any of these trading cards. You can play them even if the game dies. But it's not that. of course you can play with it, right? You can play with your little broken toaster, right? But what you can't do is you can't fucking make toast. And if you have cards, you can still play with them, but you can't play with them with other people. You can't go to events. You don't have prize support. You don't have a marketplace. The whole economy that you signed up to, that you thought you were gonna get some good toast, that is poof out the window. You're screwed. You spent $3,000, got all your nice little staples, and now you're fucked. And then you know what happens after that? You do it again in another 5 years. You go into another IP game and you buy all the little staples, and then they don't renew the IP. You can also see this with a lot of Bushiroad, Bandai, whatever have you, right? These game companies that actually do own the IP. I believe they see these things as toys. The only reason why these things get discontinued is because they know that they can only get away with it for a certain period of time. And if they're not making as much revenue as they want, they discontinue. Look at Wise Schwartz, right? That's a good example. They're not like this. They've produced games for a very long time. IP crossover, TCG, and what have you. And they know what they're about. They're like, hey, we're going to get this IP, make it a set, sell it, done. Next IP, right? They do that. But and it's very commemorable, right? But these other IPs where the IP is the focus of the game, not like IP crossover where they, sleep around with a bunch of TCGs. They're just like, okay, this is one IP, like this new Gundam one, right? They know from the beginning that they're only going to do this for 3 years. They're only going to do this 3-4 years. And then they're going to wrap it up, put it in a nice little bow, and then move on. And the whole thing that is impossible to really know with those especially is, was that their intent all along? And in my opinion, I think it is for a lot of these games, is that the big companies who make them know that they're only going to make them for a short period of time. And once everyone gets their staples, they're not going to spend a lot of money after that. So might as well axe it, create another game, and make a bunch of staples there, and then get even more money. So I think it's a lot more profitable for game companies. In closing, I think it's a lot more profitable for game companies and IP holders to periodically sell a toy for a limited period of time in order to maximize capital as much as possible without degrading their IP while dragging it on too long of a period of time. It's much easier to just axe it off after 2 to 3 years while the money was good, and then wait a couple of years after that, and then redo the same IP with a little bit different game. It's just a lot more profitable that way, and it's just what these companies do. And in my opinion, it really does suit the definition of planned obsolescence, because you as the individual who buys cards, you're buying them under the assumption that these trading card games are going to last until the company dies, or until the company loses, doesn't have enough money to continue. But these big companies, they have way enough money to continue for an infinite amount of period of time, but they choose not to, because the revenue figures aren't high enough. And the thing is, the end consumer doesn't know that, right? They get into a game that's been out for 3 years. They spend a couple $1,000s thinking that they can be in the competitive scene, and what happens is they get screwed when the game dies, right? They can't sell their cards for the same amount of money that they got into, and they can't play the game the way they expected to. And in my opinion, it just really fucking sucks. And overall, if I'm speaking to the game companies, the big wigs, I'd say, if you want to do your little planned obsolescence, I'm fine as long as you just say it from the beginning. Say, hey, and you could even hype it up as a collector's piece. Woo! A limited run of only 3 years of 5 sets. Only 5 sets. Only 5. Count them on your little finger. Only 5 sets are going to be produced. And that's it. And you can hype that shit as much as possible, but as long as you're transparent. If you're transparent from the beginning of that, and you stick to that promise, golf clap. Good job. Then you were transparent from the beginning, so the expectations of the customer who's buying the product were met. If it's, let's say it's the third year that you said you were going to make a game, and a player comes in and they buy a bunch of stuff, and as long as they know, okay, this game is ending this year, that's on them. They were in the know. They knew this. But my problem is with these games that have these documents in the background that say we are only going to have this license for 3 years, and the end consumer doesn't know that. And they're under the assumption that the games will last a while because it's Star Wars. What's going to put Star Wars out of business, right? And there are other factors like, well, after a while, there's only so many sets you can make because the IP has a fixed thing, like a canon and everything. You can't go outside that canon. There's that. But I mean, you could break the canon. Who cares? But, that's why if I can, in the end here, plug Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood, in my opinion, their intentions are extremely pure. They want to make the best damn trading card game, and they want to do it for as long as humanly possible. If they stop, it won't be because James White is, selling out and everything like that. He will pour a very good amount of money into saving the company if things were really bad, right, for the game. But these other companies, they're not like that. If they see revenue numbers dip, they're like, let's pull it out. Let's pull the rug. We're getting rid of it. Axe it at the head. We're done. Whereas Legend Story Studios, Flesh and Blood, they'd make hard decisions. They'd say, hey, we have to fire some employees. We have to, make maybe a couple less sets or what have you, or hire less premium artists or whatever have you, but we are going to stay afloat. They will do everything possible to last the longest period of time. And that's why I love Flesh and Blood, right? And that's a huge thing that is important to me. And I think it really shows the intent. And that's a big problem here, is intent. How do you measure intent of people? I could tell you this of James White has the intent to maintain Flesh and Blood for the longest period of time, but you can't verify that. Same with Konami and Bandai and Disney and everything. And I can't tell you like their intent is to only have things up for a little bit of time. But if you look at the past, if you look at their history, it kind of seems like it, right? It kind of seems like the games are doing that. And that's quite fascinating, but also upsetting. And in closing, my second closing. Again, I want to reiterate, if companies are transparent from the get-go, I'm okay with it. But if they're not, then I think it's a little bit of planned obsolescence, right? And I think the only way that it ever changes is if the players out there, if some big people out there who have a lot more viewers than I do, who aren't just normal people in their normal room, speak out about this. And they really shove it to the man, and a new game comes out with IP, and everyone gives them the middle finger and says, fuck this. You guys are trying to do this thing again to us. We're not going to buy your game. I think that's the only way that this will ever change. And that won't ever happen, in my opinion. I think it's very unlikely that scenario plays out the way it will. But I think that that's the only way, is like some global unrest of social movement saying, hey, we're not going to take this anymore. If you're going to produce a game, you better show us, especially licensed franchise type of material like Star Wars Unlimited. If you are not transparent about your stuff, about the agreement in the back end, why should we put our hard-earned money into this game if it's not going to be out for a long period of time? Especially if not only is it not going to be out for a long period of time, when it ends, you're just going to make up some bullshit excuse why it failed. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And I know I ragged on Star Wars Unlimited, but there's a lot of games out there like this. I just know that that one's the big one currently that I've seen that is like, ooh. And overall, I'm not saying it's a bad game. I haven't played it. I've seen gameplay. It looks good. You know, it looks close to Destiny. Destiny was a good game. Destiny was a good trading card game. I didn't play that one either, but I loved watching it. But overall, I think it's just, you know, you can say that I'm coming at this from a investor point of view, but I'm not. I'm doing it from a player point of view, really, because think about the player who spent $3,000 in a new TCG, and then all of a sudden, poof, it dies. All the card value that he has put into his card pieces has deteriorated instantly. And now it's like, and then it's just a falling knife. It's now 1,500, 1,400, 1,200, 1,000, 500. It keeps going down in price because more players just completely exit the community, exit the game because there's no prize support and stores don't support it and no organized play and what have you. So, just a little food for thought out there for anyone who's interested in opening up their mind and thinking about concepts in a different way. Cheers.